What is it about the late hours that sets our nerves on edge? When the sun sets and the world is painted in shades of black and blue, a different set of rules seems to apply. The familiar becomes strange, and the silence is filled with possibility. Is it just our imagination running wild in the dark? Or do we simply become more aware of what has been there all along? The stories you are about to hear are not fiction. They are real accounts from people who found themselves awake in the dead of night, only to come face to face with a terror they will never forget. These are not just tales to scare you, they are warnings. They are proof that the most frightening monsters are real, and they often appear when we are at our most vulnerable. Our first story comes from a truck driver named Mark, a man who has spent more than 20 years crisscrossing the country. He's seen it all on the endless miles of asphalt to bizarre accidents, strange weather, and all manner of lonely souls. But one night, on a desolate stretch of highway in rural Nevada, he saw something that didn't belong. It was around 2 a.m. Rain was lashing down, turning the desert landscape into a slick, black mirror. Mark was tired, his eyes heavy, but he had a deadline to meet. The rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers was the only sound, a hypnotic beat in the oppressive silence. For nearly an hour, he hadn't seen another pair of headlights. He was utterly alone. That's when his headlights caught something ahead. At first, he thought it was a deer, frozen in the beams. But as he got closer, the shape resolved itself. It was a person, a woman standing in the middle of his lane, facing away from H&M. Was wearing a simple, light-colored dress that was soaked through and plastered to her frame. It made no sense. There were no cars, no houses, nothing for miles. Mark slowed the truck, his mind racing. Had she been in an accident? Was she hurt? He flashed his high beams, hoping to get her to move, but she remained perfectly still, her back to him. A chill, entirely separate from the cold of the cab, crept up his spine. Something felt deeply wrong. He pulled the truck to a stop about 50 feet away from her and rolled down his window just a crack. The sound of the rain was deafening. He yelled out, "Ma'am? Are you all right?" She didn't move. She didn't even seem to register his presence. He was about to radio for help when she began to turn. It wasn't a normal movement. It was slow, unnervingly smooth, as if her feet weren't touching the ground. As her head came around, Mark felt the air leave his lungs. Her face, it was blank. Not in an emotionless way, but literally blank. There were no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a smooth, pale expanse of skin, like a mannequin left to melt in the sun. Panic seized him. This was not a person in need of help. This was something else entirely. Without another thought, he slammed his foot on the accelerator. The truck roared as he swerved into the other lane to get around her. As he passed, he risked a glance in his side view mirror. The figure was now facing his truck, standing exactly where it had been. And as he watched, its head tilted at an impossible angle, a silent, featureless observer in the pouring rain. Mark drove for 10 straight miles, his heart hammering against his ribs, before he dared to even check his mirrors again. The road behind him was empty. He never took that route at night again, and to this day, he cannot explain the featureless thing he saw on that lonely highway. It was one of those unexplained encounters that defy all logic. Sometimes, the most terrifying things don't come from the outside world. They come from within the walls of our own homes, the one place we are supposed to feel safe. This next account comes from a young couple, David and Sarah, who had just moved into their dream home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was an older house, filled with charm and character, but they soon discovered it was also filled with something else. They had a newborn daughter, Lily, and had just finished setting up her nursery. It was a beautiful room, painted a soft yellow, filled with toys and a brand new crib. For the first few weeks, everything was perfect. But then, the noises started. It began with the baby monitor. Late at night, long after Lily was fast asleep, faint sounds would drift through the receiver. At first, It was just static, a soft crackling they dismissed as interference. But then, a voice began to emerge from the noise. It was a woman's voice, softly humming a lullaby. It was melodic, but there was an undercurrent of sadness to it that made Sarah's skin crawl. The first few times she heard it, she would rush into the nursery, her heart pounding, only to find Lily sleeping soundly, the room still and silent. David was skeptical, suggesting it was a neighbor's monitor or even a stray radio signal. But one night, the humming was replaced by a whisper. A single, distinct word repeated over and over. Mine. That's when things escalated. They started hearing footsteps from the nursery when no one was in there. Toys would be moved from the shelves and placed in the center of the floor. A rocking chair in the corner of the room would sometimes be seen swaying gently on the monitor, as if someone had just gotten up. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night. Sarah was woken by the sound of clear, conversational chatter from the monitor. It wasn't just the whispering woman anymore. It sounded like two people. She grabbed the monitor and listened, her blood turning to ice. She heard the woman's voice, and then the unmistakable sound of a baby giggling. It wasn't Lily. Lily was a newborn. She couldn't giggle like that yet. They flew into the nursery to find the room was freezing cold. The window, which they always kept locked, was wide open, and the rocking chair was moving back and forth with more force than ever before. Lily was safe in her crib, but she was staring at a corner of the ceiling, her eyes wide. There was nothing there. They moved Lily into their own room that night. The next day, they had a paranormal investigation team come to the house. The investigators captured several electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs, in the nursery. One was the clear sound of a woman humming. Another, a voice that said, "She's so beautiful." The investigators believed the house was occupied by the spirit of a woman who had lost her own child and was now trying to claim Lily as her own. These kinds of dead-of-night horror stories are terrifying because they happen where you're supposed to be safest. David and Sarah broke their lease and moved out the following week. They never looked back. Our final story takes place in a location many of us see every day but never truly think about: an empty office building after hours. For a night watchman, the silence and solitude are part of the job. But for a man named Hector, that silence was shattered by an experience that cost him his career and his peace of mind. Hector worked security at a new, state-of-the-art office complex. It was a ghost town after 6 p.m. His job was simple: walk the floors, check the doors, and make sure everything was secure. For months, it was the easiest job he'd ever had. The only sounds were the hum of the ventilation and the squeak of his own shoes. His routine was always the same. At 3 a.m., he would take the elevator to the 12th floor, the top floor, and work his way down. One night, as the elevator doors opened onto the 12th floor, he was hit with an immediate sense of dread. The air was cold, unnaturally so, and the silence felt heavy, suffocating. As he began his patrol, he heard a sound from the far end of the floor. It was a faint, rhythmic tapping. He called out, "Hello? Security!" The tapping stopped. He convinced himself it was just the building settling, an echo from another floor. He continued his rounds, trying to shake the feeling that he was being watched. He reached the end of the hall, a large corner office with glass walls. He swept his flashlight inside. The room was empty. He turned to leave, and that's when he saw it reflected in the glass. Behind him, at the other end of the long corridor, stood a figure. It was tall and unnaturally thin, a silhouette against the dim emergency lights. It had no discernible features, just a long, shadowy form. Hector froze, his heart in his throat. He slowly turned around, but there was nothing there. The hallway was empty. He whipped his head back to the glass reflection. The figure was still there, and it was closer. It had moved halfway down the hall in the blink of an eye without making a sound. It wasn't walking. It seemed to glide. Hector didn't scream. He didn't even breathe. He stumbled backward, away from the reflection, his eyes locked on the impossible image. The figure in the glass raised a long, spindly arm and pointed directly at him. In his mind, though he heard no audible sound, he heard a voice, cold, ancient, and full of malice. It said, "You don't belong here." That broke the spell. Hector turned and ran. He didn't wait for the elevator. He sprinted for the emergency stairwell, bursting through the door and clattering down 12 flights of stairs without stopping. He ran out of the building, got in his car, and drove away. He radioed his supervisor, quit on the spot, and never returned to collect his final paycheck. He had no logical way to explain what he saw, but he knew one thing for sure. He was not alone in that building. It was a truly horrifying, unexplained encounter in the dead of the night. A featureless woman on a desolate road. A ghostly mother in a baby's nursery. A silent, shadowy figure in an empty office building. These are more than just stories. They are the experiences of real people who had the misfortune of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, during the darkest hours of the night. The world is different after the sun goes down. It's a time when the veil between our world and something else seems to be at its thinnest. So the next time you're awake in the dead of night and you hear a strange noise or see something out of the corner of your eye, remember these stories. You might not be as alone as you think. If you have your own story of a terrifying late-night experience, share it with us in the comments below. And if you want to hear more true horror stories that will keep you up at night, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Turn on all notifications so you don't miss our next descent into the darkness. Stay safe and try to get some sleep, if you can.